I pulled into my lakehouse driveway expecting my usual weekend of peace and quiet, but instead found strangers loading my custom dining table into a moving truck. My heart stopped as I rushed toward them demanding answers. The lead mover handed me official sale documents bearing what looked like my signature but felt completely wrong. My parents had orchestrated the illegal sale of my $690,000 retreat that consumed 10 years of my life to purchase and build. When I called my mother Linda in a panic, her response chilled me to the bone. "You've always wasted money on meaningless things, Kristy. We need that money to secure Danny's future." But I couldn't suppress a small smile because they had no idea what they'd actually done. Standing there watching strangers dismantle my sanctuary memories flooded back to when I first discovered this hidden gem of raw land on Lake Hartwell. I was 25 then, fresh from receiving my grandmother's modest inheritance and desperate to escape the suffocating dynamics of my family home. While my younger brother Danny enjoyed every privilege our parents could provide, I had learned early that independence required self-reliance. The property search consumed months of my free time driving through rural Georgia counties every weekend, until I found this perfect slice of undeveloped shoreline. 2 acres of sloping woodland leading to pristine water priced reasonably because it lacked utilities or road access. Most potential buyers saw obstacles, but I envisioned possibilities. My parents thought I was completely insane. "Kristy, you could buy a nice condo in Atlanta with that money," my father Robert had argued. "Why throw away your inheritance on some patch of dirt in the middle of nowhere?" But their disapproval only strengthened my resolve. This land represented everything they couldn't control about my future. The building process stretched across 5 challenging years. I worked overtime at the defense contracting firm during weekdays, then spent entire weekends hauling materials and learning construction skills through necessity and determination. Every board I nailed, every pipe I connected, every stone I placed in the fireplace foundation carried my sweat and dreams. I designed the house myself using drafting software, creating a modest but beautiful 2-bedroom cabin with an oversized kitchen and wraparound porch facing the water. The layout maximized natural light while maintaining privacy from the few neighboring properties scattered along the shoreline. Cedar siding would weather naturally, requiring minimal maintenance while blending seamlessly with the surrounding forest. Financing the construction nearly broke me financially. Bank loans covered basic materials, but the custom details that made this house truly mine required creative solutions. I sold my car and rode a bicycle to work for 8 months to afford the hand-forged iron hardware. Weekend farmers' market sales of my grandmother's preserves recipes funded the stone fireplace that became the heart of the living room. The wraparound deck took an entire summer to complete, working alone most evenings, until darkness forced me inside. Each board was measured, cut, and secured with meticulous care because I knew this deck would host countless sunrises and peaceful dinners overlooking the water. The railing design incorporated subtle curves that followed the natural shoreline, creating flowing lines that felt organic rather than imposed upon the landscape. Danny visited exactly once during the 5-year construction process. He spent 30 minutes complaining about the lack of internet access and air conditioning before declaring the whole project a waste of time and money. Our parents never came at all, claiming they were too busy supporting Danny's various academic and social activities. But I didn't build this retreat for their approval. Every nail driven and every dollar spent was an investment in my own peace and independence. The finished house became my refuge from family obligations, workplace stress, and the constant pressure to conform to others' expectations of who I should be. I furnished the space gradually, choosing each piece for comfort and functionality, rather than impressing visitors. An oversized sectional sofa faced the fireplace, perfect for reading winter evenings with a wool blanket and hot tea. The dining table was custom-built by a local craftsman from walnut trees, cleared during site preparation, creating a beautiful piece that literally grew from this land. My writing desk occupied the corner window of the main bedroom overlooking the water through floor-to-ceiling glass that brought the outdoors inside. This was where I journaled, painted watercolor landscapes, and dreamed about the future I was building for myself away from family drama and expectations. The house became my healing space over the following 5 years. Weekends there restored my energy and perspective after difficult weeks managing government contracts and navigating office politics. I hosted exactly the kinds of gatherings I wanted: small groups of genuine friends who appreciated nature conversation and simple pleasures, like grilling fresh fish and watching sunsets from the deck. But now, watching strangers carry away pieces of my sanctuary, I felt something far beyond anger or sadness. This violation cut to the core of everything I had built, both literally and emotionally. My parents hadn't just sold a house, they had stolen my independence, my peace, and my future security without a moment's consideration for my feelings or rights. The climactic realization that shattered my remaining illusions about my family came when I found my old checkbook in the moving truck's cab. Several checks had been carefully removed, obviously used for practicing my signature, until they achieved perfect forgery. The level of premeditation and deception involved in this theft revealed a calculated betrayal that went far deeper than simple desperation or poor judgment. The signature forgery discovery transported me back to childhood memories I had tried to forget. Growing up in the Harrison household meant navigating a complex hierarchy where Danny's needs always took precedence over mine, regardless of fairness or logic. While I babysat neighborhood children to earn spending money at 13, Danny received generous allowances for completing basic chores like taking out trash. High school amplified these disparities dramatically. My parents enrolled Danny in expensive SAT prep courses, private tutoring sessions, and leadership camps designed to boost his college applications. Meanwhile, I worked part-time at a local restaurant to save money for my own standardized test fees and application costs. When I earned a partial academic scholarship to State University, the family celebration lasted approximately 5 minutes before conversations shifted back to Danny's social activities and sports achievements. College years brought even starker contrasts in parental support and investment. Danny attended a prestigious private university with full financial backing from our parents, who proudly discuss his fraternity membership and spring break trips to exotic destinations. I lived in the cheapest dormitory available, worked 20 hours weekly in the campus library, and spent spring breaks earning extra money at temporary jobs rather than relaxing on beaches. My parents justified these differences by claiming Danny needed more support because he struggled academically, while I had always been naturally self-sufficient and responsible. But their logic never explained why success and independence should be punished with neglect, while mediocrity received endless resources and attention. The pattern continued into our adult careers. When Danny changed majors 3 times and took 6 years to graduate with a communications degree, our parents celebrated his persistence and determination. When I earned my engineering degree in 4 years while working and graduated summa cum laude, they expressed mild approval before immediately asking when I planned to help support Danny's job search efforts. Building my lake house represented the ultimate declaration of independence from these toxic family dynamics. Every dollar I invested in that property was money that couldn't be redirected toward Danny's latest scheme or crisis. For the first time in my life, I possessed something valuable that existed entirely outside my parents' control and manipulation. Or so I had believed until today. The depth of their surveillance and planning became clear as I examined the forged documents more carefully. These weren't hasty signatures scrawled in desperation. They showed evidence of extensive practice and refinement. Someone had studied my handwriting patterns, signature variations, and even the specific pen types I typically used for legal documents. But the most devastating discovery awaited me in the real estate paperwork scattered across the truck's front seat. Handwritten notes in my mother's familiar script detailed conversations with family friends and neighbors, systematically gathering information about my financial situation, work schedule, and property details over several months of careful preparation. One note particularly stung. Kristy always has been too proud to accept help even when she clearly can't handle adult responsibilities alone. The lakehouse proves she makes impulsive decisions without considering family needs or long-term consequences. The realization that my parents had been portraying me as mentally unstable and financially irresponsible while preparing their theft felt like a physical blow to my chest. They hadn't just stolen my property, they had systematically destroyed my reputation within our community as foundation work for their planned deception. My hands trembled as I dialed the real estate agent's number printed on the sale documents. Patricia Williams answered on the second ring, her professional tone shifting to confusion when I identified myself as the supposed seller. Miss Harrison, I'm not sure I understand. Your father completed the transaction yesterday afternoon. He had all the proper documentation, including power of attorney papers and your identification verification. Patricia's voice carried the bewilderment of someone whose orderly business world had suddenly tilted sideways. Mrs. Williams, I never signed any power of attorney documents. I was in Denver on business this entire week and knew nothing about any sale until I arrived here 20 minutes ago to find strangers moving my furniture. The words felt surreal, leaving my lips as if I were describing someone else's nightmare rather than my own reality. The silence stretched uncomfortably before Patricia responded with careful professional caution. Miss Harrison, I need to be very clear about what occurred. Your father, Robert Harrison, presented himself as your authorized representative with what appeared to be legitimate legal documentation. He knew specific details about your property improvements, including the custom kitchen renovation completed last spring and the new dock installation from 2 summers ago. My stomach lurched as I realized the implications. These weren't details someone could guess or research casually. My parents had been gathering intelligence about my property investments and improvements over years of casual conversations, storing information for potential future exploitation. Oh, Mrs. Williams, I need you to understand that this entire transaction is fraudulent. Those documents were forged, and I will be contacting law enforcement immediately. Can you tell me where the proceeds from this sale have been transferred? Another pause. Then Patricia's voice dropped to nearly a whisper. The funds were wire transferred according to the seller's instructions yesterday evening. $400,000 went to an investment account belonging to Daniel Harrison, and the remaining $270,000 covered outstanding loan obligations secured against the property. The room spun as I processed this information. Not only had my parents stolen my house, but they had simultaneously saddled me with unknown debt obligations while funneling the majority of proceeds directly to Danny's benefit. The sophistication of this scheme suggested months or even years of careful planning and preparation. Mrs. Williams, I need copies of all documentation related to this transaction. I'll be contacting the FBI about interstate fraud, and these documents will be crucial evidence. My voice sounded steadier than I felt, drawing on professional training that emphasized clear communication during crisis situations. Of course, Miss Harrison, I'm truly sorry this has happened. In 20 years of real estate practice, I've never encountered anything like this situation. Patricia's genuine remorse provided small comfort against the magnitude of betrayal I was discovering. The drive to First National Bank consumed 15 minutes that felt like hours. My mind raced through questions about those mysterious loan obligations and how my parents had accessed my financial information without my knowledge or consent. The bank's imposing brick facade normally represented security and stability, but today it symbolized another potential violation of my privacy and trust. Branch manager Thomas Reed reviewed my identification carefully before accessing my account information. His expression grew increasingly grim as he scrolled through recent transaction history on his computer screen. Miss Harrison, I'm afraid there have been several concerning developments with your accounts over the past 6 months. Multiple phone inquiries requesting account balances and transaction histories, all verified using your social security number and answers to security questions. I never made any phone calls requesting account information, Mr. Reed. Can you provide details about these inquiries? The pattern of systematic violation was becoming clearer with each new revelation. Thomas printed several pages of call logs and handed them across his mahogany desk. The inquiries came from different phone numbers, but the caller consistently provided accurate personal information, including your mother's maiden name, first pet's name, and elementary school attendance. Scanning the documents revealed a months-long campaign of information gathering that enabled my parents to monitor my financial situation while planning their theft. They had known exactly how much equity existed in the lakehouse, which loans were secured against the property, and even my work travel schedule that would provide opportunity for executing their scheme. But the most chilling discovery awaited me in the bank's security footage from the previous week. Thomas hesitated before showing me the video, warning that the content might be disturbing. The grainy black and white recording showed a woman I initially didn't recognize sitting in the customer service area, speaking earnestly with a bank representative. Only when I heard the audio did the horrible truth become clear. The woman on screen was my mother, but she was speaking with my voice, my tone, my speech patterns, and even my characteristic hand gestures while discussing loan modifications and account access procedures. How long has she been practicing to sound like me? The question escaped my lips as a horrified whisper. Thomas shook his head grimly. Based on the quality of the impersonation, I would estimate months of preparation. This level of vocal mimicry requires extensive practice and study of speech patterns. The realization that my mother had been secretly recording my phone conversations for months, analyzing my voice and mannerisms to perfect her impersonation, felt like the ultimate violation of privacy and trust. Every family phone call, every casual conversation, every expression of love or concern had been weaponized against me for financial exploitation. The 40-minute drive to Danny's apartment complex in suburban Atlanta gave me time to process the full scope of my family's betrayal while planning my confrontation strategy. My brother lived in a trendy development that clearly exceeded his legitimate income from sporadic freelance graphic design work. The visitor parking lot showcased luxury vehicles that raised immediate questions about funding sources. Danny answered his door wearing expensive designer clothes I had never seen before, his surprised expression quickly shifting to defensive wariness when he recognized my emotional state. The apartment behind him displayed new furniture, high-end electronics, and artwork that would cost more than most people's annual salaries. Kristy, what brings you here on a Saturday? You look upset about something. His attempt at casual concern might have been convincing if not for the guilty anxiety flickering across his features. Cut the act, Danny. I know about the lakehouse sale, the forged documents, and the $400,000 transferred to your investment account yesterday. The only question is whether you're going to cooperate with the federal investigation or force me to treat you as a co-conspirator in this fraud. His face went pale as he stepped back from the doorway, gesturing for me to enter while glancing nervously toward neighboring apartments. The interior revealed even more evidence of sudden wealth acquisition, including a professional gaming setup that would cost tens of thousands of dollars and artwork from galleries I recognized as extremely expensive. Kristy, you don't understand the full situation. Mom and Dad explained how you've been struggling financially and making poor investment decisions. They showed me documentation proving the lake house was draining your resources and preventing you from building a stable future. The practiced quality of his response suggested extensive coaching from our parents, but cracks appeared in his composure as he avoided direct eye contact while speaking. Danny had never been skilled at deception, which made his participations in this scheme even more heartbreaking than surprising. What documentation, Danny? Because I never signed anything authorizing them to access my financial information, much less sell my property and transfer the proceeds to your benefit. I kept my voice level, despite the rage building inside my chest. Danny moved toward his kitchen bar and retrieved a manila folder containing bank statements, loan documents, and what appeared to be psychological evaluation reports. The papers looked official and professional, but examining them revealed subtle inconsistencies that suggested forgery or fabrication. They showed me how the property taxes were behind how you had taken multiple loans against the house value and how your work performance was declining due to financial stress. Mom said you were too proud to ask for family help, so they had to intervene before you lost everything to foreclosure. The sophistication of this deception stunned me. My parents hadn't simply forged a few signatures. They had created an entire fictional narrative about my financial and mental health status, complete with supporting documentation designed to justify their theft as family intervention. Danny, every single piece of information in this folder is fabricated. My property taxes are current. I have no loans secured against the lakehouse, and my work performance recently earned me a promotion with security clearance upgrade. They've been lying to you while stealing from me. His confidence wavered as he re-examined the documents with fresh skepticism. But why would they lie about something so serious? They said you needed help, but were too stubborn to accept it. Because they needed your cooperation and emotional support to justify what they were planning. Think about it, Danny. When have our parents ever intervened to help me with anything? They've spent our entire lives prioritizing your needs while expecting me to solve my own problems independently. The truth began penetrating his carefully constructed justifications as he remembered decades of family dynamics that contradicted their sudden concern for my welfare. Danny set the folder aside and slumped onto his leather sectional sofa, the weight of realization settling across his shoulders. Jesus Christ, Kristy. They said the startup funding came from family investments and your voluntary contribution. They made it sound like you wanted to support my business venture as a way of bringing the family closer together. What startup, Danny? What exactly are they funding with my stolen money? The question opened floodgates of information that revealed the full scope of their deception. Danny explained his plans for a technology consulting firm that would help small businesses integrate artificial intelligence tools into their operations. The business plan looked legitimate and well-researched, suggesting genuine effort and intelligence behind the concept. But the funding mechanism was entirely built on theft and fraud. They promised me $500,000 in startup capital, saying it came from family savings and your lakehouse equity release. I've already signed lease agreements for office space and hired 3 employees based on their funding commitments. The cruel irony struck me immediately. My parents had stolen my financial security to fund Danny's dreams while ensuring that their theft would ultimately destroy his business when the truth emerged. They were willing to sacrifice both their children's futures to maintain their own facade of financial stability and family leadership. But Danny's next revelation shattered any remaining illusions about the limited scope of their deception. Kristy, there's something else you need to know. Over the years, Mom and Dad have asked me to sign documents they said were family financial planning papers. I never read them carefully because I trusted them completely. He retrieved another folder from his bedroom containing copies of documents I had supposedly signed over the past 3 years. Property transfers, loan agreements, investment authorizations, and insurance policy modifications, all bearing forged versions of my signature alongside Danny's legitimate endorsements. They told me you were shy about family financial discussions, but wanted to ensure I would be taken care of if anything happened to you. They said these papers protected both of us by creating family trusts and shared assets. The pattern became devastatingly clear. My parents had been systematically stealing from me for years, using Danny's innocent cooperation to legitimize their fraud while building toward this final massive theft of my lakehouse equity. Every family gathering, every casual conversation, every expression of sibling affection had been manipulated to facilitate their long-term criminal enterprise. But the most heartbreaking discovery was yet to come. Danny's tearful confession revealed that their parents had been stealing from his business account as well, using startup funds to cover their own mounting debts, while promising him additional capital that would never materialize. They've already taken $60,000 from my business account for what they called temporary family emergencies. I thought it was just short-term borrowing, but now I realize they never intended to repay anything they've stolen from either of us. Monday morning found me sitting in the polished conference room of Morrison and Associates, clutching a briefcase full of evidence that documented my family's systematic fraud. Attorney Sarah Morrison reviewed the documents with practiced efficiency, her expression growing increasingly grave as the scope of the deception became clear. Ms. Harrison, what you're describing constitutes multiple federal crimes, including wire fraud, identity theft, forgery, and racketeering. The sophisticated nature of these activities suggests this isn't impulsive behavior, but rather a calculated criminal enterprise operating over several years. Her clinical assessment provided validation but little comfort. The legal complexity overwhelmed me as Morrison explained the various jurisdictions involved. Federal authorities would handle the wire fraud aspects since money crossed state lines, while local prosecutors might pursue the forgery and theft charges. Each jurisdiction operated on different timelines with varying levels of cooperation and communication. The challenge we face is proving criminal intent versus family financial mismanagement. Defense attorneys will argue that your parents believed they were acting in your best interests, even if their methods were legally questionable. Morrison's experience with family fraud cases had taught her to prepare clients for disappointing realities. Asset recovery presented another labyrinth of complications. Even if we proved criminal activity and secured convictions, recovering the stolen funds would require separate civil proceedings that could stretch across years of litigation. Danny's business expenditures had already dissipated significant portions of the money, while my parents' mounting debts threatened to consume whatever remained. Mrs. Morrison, I understand the challenges, but I need you to understand that this isn't just about money. My parents have systematically destroyed my financial security while damaging my professional reputation and family relationships. I need them held accountable for what they've done. Her expression softened as she recognized the emotional dimensions of the case beyond its legal complexities. I hear you, and I want you to know that we'll pursue every available avenue for justice and recovery. But I also need to prepare you for the possibility that this process will be emotionally devastating and financially draining. Morrison requested comprehensive documentation, including bank records, property documents, employment verification, and character references that would establish my credibility and financial responsibility. The investigation would require forensic accounting, handwriting analysis, and digital evidence recovery that would cost tens of thousands of dollars, with no guarantee of successful prosecution. But as we discussed strategy and timelines, Morrison's assistant interrupted with urgent news that changed everything. A preliminary credit check had revealed loan obligations I knew nothing about, secured against properties I didn't remember pledging as collateral. Ms. Harrison, it appears your parents have been using forged documents to secure significant loans against not only your lake house, but also your primary residence and retirement accounts. The total debt obligation currently exceeds $200,000. The room tilted as I processed this information. Not only had my parents stolen my savings and property, but they had also saddled me with massive debt obligations that could destroy my credit rating and force me into bankruptcy. The sophistication of their scheme had encompassed every aspect of my financial life. Morrison immediately contacted the credit reporting agencies to place fraud alerts on my accounts while requesting detailed reports of all recent inquiries and new obligations. The process would take weeks to complete, but preliminary findings suggested my parents had been actively borrowing against my assets for at least 18 months. The good news is that fraudulent debt obligations can be challenged and removed from your credit record once we prove criminal activity. The bad news is that this process requires extensive documentation and can take months or years to fully resolve. As if the debt revelation wasn't devastating enough, Morrison's investigation uncovered evidence that my parents had been intercepting my mail for over a year. Insurance refund checks, tax rebates, investment dividends, and even utility bill overpayments had been systematically stolen and deposited into accounts I couldn't access. Your parents established a mail forwarding service using forged authorization documents directing specific categories of mail to a post office box they control. The Postal Service requires identification to establish forwarding, but they used fake documents bearing your information. The mail fraud added another federal crime to the growing list of charges while explaining how my parents had maintained such detailed knowledge of my financial situation. Every check, every statement, every official correspondence had been flowing through their hands for months, while I remained completely unaware. Mrs. Morrison, how is it possible that such extensive criminal activity went undetected for so long? Surely banks and government agencies have procedures to prevent this kind of systematic fraud. Her explanation revealed uncomfortable truths about the limitations of fraud prevention systems that rely heavily on trust and family relationships. Parents enjoy presumed authority over adult children's affairs in many institutional contexts, making family fraud particularly difficult to detect and prevent. Unfortunately, your parents exploited gaps in verification procedures that assume family members act in good faith. Banks don't typically question parents seeking information about adult children, especially when they can provide accurate personal details and account information. The meeting concluded with Morrison filing initial complaints with federal authorities while beginning asset preservation actions to freeze my parents' remaining resources. The legal wheels were finally turning, but she warned that criminal investigations typically required months to develop, while civil recovery could stretch across years. Miss Harrison, I want you to understand that pursuing this case will likely destroy your family relationships permanently while subjecting you to intense scrutiny and stress. Are you prepared for that reality? Looking across her desk at the mountain of evidence documenting my family's betrayal, I realized that meaningful family relationships had died the moment my parents decided to forge my signature and steal my future. Legal action wouldn't destroy my family. It would simply acknowledge the destruction they had already caused. The climactic revelation that ended our meeting came when Morrison's private investigator called with preliminary findings from social media and public records research. My parents had been telling neighbors and acquaintances for months that I was struggling with addiction and financial problems, preparing the community to accept their version of events when the theft became public knowledge. Word spread through our small Georgia hometown with the relentless efficiency of kudzu vine. By Wednesday evening, my phone buzzed constantly with calls from relatives, family friends, and former neighbors who had heard conflicting versions of the lakehouse situation. The conversations revealed how thoroughly my parents had poisoned community opinion against me while building support for their actions. Aunt Margaret called first, her voice heavy with disappointment and confusion. "Kristy, honey, your mother explained how you've been making some concerning decisions lately. She said the lake house was causing financial strain and that you agreed to the sale, but are now having second thoughts. Aunt Margaret, they forged my signature and stole my property. I never agreed to anything, and I'm pursuing federal criminal charges against them. The directness of my response created uncomfortable silence on the line. But sweetie, they're your parents. Surely this is just a misunderstanding that can be worked out within the family. Your mother seemed so worried about your well-being, and she showed me some documents that suggested you were struggling with debt problems. The conversation continued for 20 frustrating minutes as I tried to explain the truth, while Aunt Margaret repeated my parents' fabricated narrative. Her loyalty to family hierarchy and generation prevented her from accepting that my parents could be capable of such systematic deception and theft. Similar conversations followed with other relatives who had been carefully prepared to reject my version of events. Uncle Frank expressed concern about my vindictive behavior toward family members who were only trying to help. Cousin Jennifer questioned whether work stress might be affecting my judgment and perspective on family financial arrangements. The most painful call came from Mrs. Patterson, my fourth-grade teacher who had remained a family friend over the decades. Her gentle voice carried profound disappointment as she shared my parents' version of recent events. Kristy, dear, I've known you since you were 9 years old, and I hate seeing this conflict tearing your family apart. Your parents are so worried about you, and they explained how the property was causing problems with your finances and work performance. Mrs. Patterson, I need you to understand that everything they told you is fabricated. They created false documents and stories to justify stealing my property and money. The FBI is investigating their criminal activity. Even speaking those words felt surreal and devastating. Oh, honey, that sounds so serious and frightening. Are you getting professional help to work through these feelings? Sometimes stress can make situations seem worse than they really are. The implication that I was delusional or mentally unstable cut deeper than direct accusations of lying. My parents had carefully constructed a narrative that positioned me as unreliable and unstable, making any defense I offered seem like further evidence of psychological problems. But the community response wasn't entirely negative. Former colleagues from my early career reached out with support and disbelief that anyone could question my character or competence. My graduate school roommate flew in from California to provide emotional support and serve as a character witness for legal proceedings. Most surprisingly, several lake house neighbors contacted me with information that would prove crucial for the investigation. Tom and Beverly Chen, whose property adjoined mine, had noticed unusual activity around my house over the past month, including strange vehicles and people they didn't recognize accessing the property. Kristy, we thought it was odd when your father showed up last weekend with real estate agents, especially since you had just told us about your promotion and plans for expanding the deck. The timing didn't make sense, but we figured family finances were complicated. Their testimony would establish timeline evidence proving my parents had been planning the sale while I was traveling for work, completely unaware of their activities. Security cameras from neighboring properties captured footage of my parents surveying the house and meeting with potential buyers days before forging the sale documents. The professional consequences of my family's actions began manifesting at work as well. My supervisor, Colonel Martinez, called me into his office Thursday morning with obvious discomfort about addressing personal matters that might affect my security clearance. Harrison, I need to ask you directly about some allegations that have come to our attention regarding financial irregularities and family conflicts. Your clearance requires absolute honesty about any legal issues or potential compromises. Sir, my parents have committed federal fraud using my identity and property. I'm cooperating fully with law enforcement and have documented evidence of their criminal activity. This situation represents victimization, not any misconduct on my part. Colonel Martinez reviewed the preliminary police reports and legal filings. I provided his expression shifting from concern to anger as he understood the scope of my parents' actions. Military personnel face particular scrutiny regarding financial stability and family relationships, making me vulnerable to clearance suspension even as a victim rather than perpetrator. Harrison, I'm satisfied that you've handled this situation appropriately and professionally. However, I need you to keep me informed about any developments that might affect your availability or focus. Federal investigations can be disruptive and stressful. The workplace support provided crucial validation that my character and competence remained intact, despite my family's attempts to portray me as unstable and irresponsible. Professional colleagues who worked with me daily recognized the fabricated nature of my parents' accusations. But the most devastating community response came from my childhood friend Jessica, who had maintained contact with my family through social media and holiday gatherings. Her phone call revealed the true depth of my parents' long-term planning and manipulation. Kristy, I need to tell you something that's been bothering me for months. Back in February, your mom reached out asking hypothetical questions about what family members should do if someone they loved was making self-destructive financial decisions. What kind of questions, Jessica? My stomach clenched with anticipation of another betrayal. She asked whether intervention was appropriate when adults were making choices that hurt family members, and she described a situation that sounded exactly like your lakehouse investment. She even asked whether I thought families had obligations to prevent financial disasters, even if it meant taking controversial actions. The revelation that my parents had been testing community opinion and building support for their planned theft months in advance demonstrated a level of premeditation that transformed this from family crisis to calculated criminal conspiracy. They had systematically prepared friends and relatives to accept their version of events while gathering intelligence about potential resistance to their actions. Jessica's confession opened floodgates of similar revelations from other friends who had received subtle inquiries about my mental health, financial stability, and decision-making capabilities over the preceding months. My parents had conducted a comprehensive campaign to destroy my credibility while positioning themselves as concerned family members forced into difficult interventions. The climactic moment of community revelation came when my former high school guidance counselor, Mrs. Rodriguez, called with information that changed my understanding of my parents' motivations entirely. She had received a call from my mother 3 months earlier asking about resources for adult children struggling with gambling addictions and financial irresponsibility. Your mother seemed so concerned and asked whether intervention was appropriate when family assets were at risk. She mentioned that you had been making expensive purchases and hiding financial problems from the family. The gambling addiction narrative explained how my parents planned to justify their theft while ensuring community support for their actions. If friends and neighbors believed I was struggling with addiction, my protests about fraud would seem like typical denial behavior rather than legitimate victimization claims. Friday morning's appointment with financial advisor Mark Thompson revealed the full scope of damage my parents had inflicted on my economic security. His corner office overlooked downtown Atlanta's financial district, but the view felt ominous rather than inspiring as we reviewed the wreckage of my carefully built financial foundation. Miss Harrison, I've completed a comprehensive analysis of your financial position, and I'm afraid the results are quite serious. Beyond the obvious lakehouse theft, your parents have compromised your credit rating, retirement savings, and future borrowing capacity through systematic fraud. Thompson's presentation used charts and graphs that transformed my personal catastrophe into cold statistics, but the numbers told a devastating story. My credit score had plummeted from excellent to poor due to loan obligations I never authorized. Retirement account withdrawals triggered massive tax penalties that would consume years of savings to resolve. The fraudulent loans secured against your properties total $237,000 with interest rates and payment schedules that would consume 60% of your current income. Even if we successfully challenge these obligations, the process could take 2 to 3 years to fully resolve. The mathematical precision of my parents' destruction impressed me even while devastating my financial future. They had calculated exactly how much debt my income could theoretically service while leaving me unable to maintain my current lifestyle or build future security. But Thompson's analysis revealed additional damage I hadn't yet discovered. Investment accounts I had built over 15 years showed systematic withdrawals disguised as routine rebalancing activities. The pattern stretched back 18 months, suggesting my parents had been slowly draining my resources while planning their final massive theft. These withdrawals were processed using phone authorizations with security question responses that would have required extensive knowledge of your personal history and financial details. The sophistication suggests long-term planning rather than opportunistic behavior. Early retirement contributions that should have grown to substantial sums had been redirected to accounts I couldn't access or trace. The compounding effect of these thefts would cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost growth over the remaining decades of my career. Miss Harrison, I need to be direct about your situation. Even if legal proceedings recover some stolen assets, you're looking at approximately 10 years to rebuild the financial security you had achieved before this fraud began. The timing couldn't be worse given your age and career stage. Thompson's honesty was appreciated, but brutal. At 32, I should have been building wealth and planning for future opportunities, rather than recovering from family-inflicted financial devastation. The lost decade of progress would affect every major life decision, from career advancement to family planning. Insurance analysis revealed another dimension of my parents' systematic assault on my financial stability. Life insurance policies I had purchased years earlier showed beneficiary changes and loan withdrawals that reduced their value, while redirecting benefits to family members I never intended to support. The life insurance modifications were processed using forged authorization documents that appeared to be quite sophisticated. Your parents essentially converted your life insurance into a source of current income for themselves while destroying the coverage you intended to maintain. Homeowners insurance on both my primary residence and the lake house had been modified to add my parents as additional insureds while changing claim payment procedures to accounts they controlled. If either property suffered damage, insurance proceeds would flow directly to them rather than to me as the actual owner. This pattern suggests your parents were preparing for multiple contingencies, including potential property damage that could generate insurance claims. The level of planning indicates they viewed your assets as resources available for their use, regardless of legal ownership. The vehicle insurance review revealed similar manipulation, with my parents added as drivers and claim recipients, despite having no ownership interest or legitimate insurance needs. They had transformed every aspect of my financial life into potential income sources for themselves. But Thompson's most disturbing discovery involved retirement account beneficiary designations that had been changed without my knowledge or consent. Instead of supporting my future financial security, these accounts would now benefit my parents and brother upon my death, creating perverse incentives that made me genuinely fearful for my physical safety. Ms. Harrison, given the extent of financial manipulation and the beneficiary changes, I strongly recommend you consult with security professionals about personal safety precautions. People who engage in this level of financial fraud sometimes escalate to more direct methods when legal pressure increases. The suggestion that my family might pose physical danger seemed paranoid and extreme, but Thompson's experience with fraud cases had taught him to recognize warning signs of escalating criminal behavior. Financial predators who targeted family members showed particularly dangerous psychological profiles. Thompson concluded our meeting with specific recommendations for protecting my remaining assets and beginning the slow process of financial recovery. New bank accounts at different institutions would prevent further unauthorized access. Credit monitoring services would alert me to any additional fraudulent activity. Legal trust structures would protect future earnings from family manipulation. The most important thing to understand is that financial recovery is possible but will require discipline, patience, and probably some career sacrifices to accelerate debt elimination and savings rebuilding. You're young enough to recover, but it won't be easy or quick. As devastating as Thompson's assessment proved, his final revelation transformed my understanding of my parents' motivations and planning. Forensic accounting had uncovered evidence that they were facing personal bankruptcy from gambling debts and failed investments, making their theft of my assets a desperate attempt to avoid their own financial ruin. Your parents have been systematically liquidating assets and borrowing against future income for approximately 3 years. The lakehouse sale wasn't about funding your brother's startup. It was about preventing their own bankruptcy and potential criminal prosecution for embezzlement from your father's employer. The insurance investigation had revealed that Robert Harrison faced federal charges for stealing client funds from the accounting firm where he worked as a partner. Linda's gambling activities had generated debts to dangerous people who demanded immediate payment. My lakehouse represented their salvation rather than Danny's opportunity. Miss Harrison, your parents weren't just stealing from you, they were using you as a shield against their own criminal exposure and personal danger. The level of desperation involved suggests they would have continued escalating their fraud indefinitely to maintain their lifestyle and avoid consequences. But the most chilling discovery awaited in the insurance company's investigation files. My parents had recently increased my life insurance coverage while positioning themselves as beneficiaries, creating financial incentives for my death that extended far beyond simple greed into genuinely dangerous territory. Thompson's final warning echoed in my mind as I left his office. People who steal hundreds of thousands of dollars from family members have already crossed major psychological boundaries. Adding life insurance motives to that equation creates situations where victims need to take personal security very seriously indeed. Monday morning brought a summons to report immediately to the security office at Dynamic Defense Solutions, where my 12-year career in government contracting had earned me senior project manager status and top secret clearance. The stark fluorescent lighting and windowless conference room created an atmosphere more suited to interrogation than employee consultation. Security Chief Amanda Walsh reviewed my personnel file with clinical detachment before addressing the elephant in the room. Miss Harrison, we've received inquiries from federal investigators regarding your involvement in financial irregularities and potential security risks. Your clearance requires immediate review pending resolution of these matters. Ma'am, I'm the victim of identity theft and fraud perpetrated by my family members. I'm cooperating fully with law enforcement and have provided complete documentation to support criminal charges against the perpetrators. My voice remained steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. Walsh consulted her notes before continuing with questions that revealed how thoroughly my parents had contaminated my professional reputation. We've received reports suggesting you may be experiencing financial distress that could make you vulnerable to foreign influence or bribery. Can you explain recent changes in your spending patterns and lifestyle choices? The implication that I might sell classified information to resolve financial problems created by my family's theft felt like salt poured into open wounds. Years of loyal service and spotless security record meant nothing when faced with allegations designed to destroy my career and professional credibility. Ma'am, my financial situation is stable aside from fraudulent debts created by criminal activity I'm actively prosecuting. I have no spending pattern changes or lifestyle modifications that would suggest financial distress or security risks. The formal language felt stilted, but security interviews demanded precise communication. But Walsh's next questions revealed the true extent of my parents' assault on my professional life. Miss Harrison, we've received direct communications from individuals claiming to be your family members, expressing concern about your mental health and decision-making capacity. They've suggested you may be struggling with substance abuse or gambling problems that could compromise your judgment. The room temperature seemed to drop as I realized my parents had contacted my employer, directly poisoning my professional relationships while building support for their fraudulent narrative. The sophistication of their attack encompassed every aspect of my life, leaving no safe space untouched by their manipulation. Oda, ma'am, those communications are part of the criminal conspiracy I'm reporting to federal authorities. My parents have systematically spread false information about my mental health and financial stability to justify their theft and discredit my testimony against them. Walsh's expression softened slightly as she recognized the defensive position I occupied through no fault of my own. Security investigations typically focused on employee misconduct rather than victimization, creating procedural challenges for handling cases where cleared personnel faced family-based criminal targeting. Miss Harrison, I need you to understand that maintaining security clearance requires not just personal integrity, but also freedom from potential compromise or coercion. Even as a victim, your situation creates vulnerabilities that we must evaluate carefully. The conversation continued for 2 hours as Walsh reviewed every aspect of my financial history, family relationships, and recent behavioral patterns. The process felt invasive and humiliating, transforming me from trusted professional into potential security threat simply because my family had committed crimes against me. Colleagues began treating me differently as the word spread about the security investigation and criminal charges involving my family. Lunch invitations stopped coming. Project assignments shifted to other managers without explanation. The casual camaraderie that made work enjoyable evaporated under clouds of suspicion and awkward uncertainty. My immediate supervisor, Dr. Patricia Evans, called me into her office Wednesday afternoon with obvious reluctance about addressing personal matters that were affecting team dynamics and project security protocols. Kristy, I need to be direct about concerns raised by team members regarding your recent behavior and emotional state. Several people have noted changes in your focus and decision-making that might reflect stress or distraction from personal issues. Dr. Evans, I've maintained professional performance standards despite dealing with criminal prosecution of family members who stole my property and money. If team members have specific concerns about my work quality, please provide details so I can address them directly. But the conversation revealed how subtly workplace relationships had shifted as colleagues struggled to process as information about my family situation while maintaining professional boundaries. Some offered support and sympathy, while others maintained careful distance to avoid potential contamination by association with criminal activity. The challenge we face is that government contracting requires absolute confidence in employee reliability and judgment. Even when personal problems aren't your fault, they can create security concerns that affect your clearance and project assignments. Dr. Evans explained that my current project involved sensitive negotiations with international partners who conducted extensive background investigations on all American personnel. Family criminal activity, regardless of my victim status, could provide foreign intelligence services with leverage or manipulation opportunities. We're not questioning your integrity or loyalty, but we need to evaluate whether your personal situation creates vulnerabilities that could be exploited by hostile actors seeking classified information or project disruption. The meeting concluded with my temporary reassignment to less sensitive projects while security evaluations proceeded and criminal investigations developed. The career implications were devastating, even though no fault attached to my conduct or character. But Thursday brought revelation that my parents' assault on my professional life extended beyond simple character assassination into active sabotage designed to destroy my career prospects permanently. Human Resources Director Michael Foster called with disturbing information about recent communications from my family. Miss Harrison, we've received a formal letter from individuals claiming to be your parents, alleging that you've been stealing company resources to fund gambling activities and substance abuse problems. They've requested intervention and offered to provide documentation supporting their claims. The systematic nature of my parents' attack revealed planning that extended far beyond simple theft into comprehensive destruction of every aspect of my life and future prospects. They weren't content with stealing my money. They wanted to eliminate my ability to rebuild and recover. Mr. Foster, that letter is part of the criminal conspiracy I'm prosecuting against my parents. They've created false documentation and narratives to discredit me while covering their own criminal activity. Foster assured me that company policy required thorough investigation of such allegations before taking any action, but the mere existence of formal complaints would remain in my personnel file regardless of their ultimate validity. The long-term career damage was already occurring even before any resolution of the underlying charges. But the most devastating professional consequence emerged Friday when Colonel Martinez informed me that my security clearance was under formal review by the Defense Security Service, potentially suspending my access to classified projects for months or years while investigations proceeded. Harrison, I want you to know that this review reflects bureaucratic requirements rather than any doubts about your character or reliability. However, the timeline for resolution could significantly impact your career progression and project opportunities. The climactic revelation came when company security discovered that my parents had been researching my employer's organizational structure, client relationships, and security procedures through public records and social media investigation. They had gathered intelligence about my professional environment as part of their systematic campaign to destroy my career and credibility. Foster's final warning underscored the personal safety implications of my parents' escalating criminal behavior. Miss Harrison, people who engage in this level of systematic harassment and professional sabotage sometimes escalate to more direct threats when legal pressure increases. Please consider personal security precautions while these matters are resolved. The accumulated weight of betrayal, legal complexity, and professional uncertainty crashed down on me Saturday evening as I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by boxes of legal documents and evidence that documented my family's systematic destruction of my life. Sleep had become elusive meals forgotten, and simple daily activities felt overwhelmingly difficult. My hands trembled as I poured another cup of coffee, the fourth since dinner time, knowing that caffeine would only worsen the anxiety attacks that had become daily occurrences. The phone rang constantly with calls from lawyers, investigators, family members, and reporters who had somehow learned about the case and wanted statements for local news coverage. The financial calculations consumed my thoughts obsessively. Even if legal proceedings recovered some stolen assets, rebuilding would require years of sacrifice and careful planning. Career advancement seemed impossible while security clearance remained under review. Marriage and family plans felt indefinitely postponed while dealing with criminal prosecution and civil recovery efforts. But the emotional devastation cut deeper than financial losses or career setbacks. The parents who had raised me, taught me values, and shared 32 years of family experiences had systematically plotted my destruction while maintaining facades of love and concern. The betrayal felt like emotional surgery without anesthesia. Sunday morning brought a panic attack so severe I considered calling emergency services. Chest pains, difficulty breathing, and overwhelming sense of doom convinced me I was having a heart attack, until rational thought returned and I recognized the symptoms of acute stress response. My neighbor, retired nurse Eleanor Davies, heard my sobbing through the thin apartment walls and knocked with gentle insistence until I answered the door. Her maternal presence provided the first genuine comfort I had experienced since discovering my family's crimes. "Honey, you look like you haven't slept or eaten properly in days. Come sit down and let me make you some tea while you tell me what's happening." Eleanor's straightforward kindness cut through the emotional fog that had consumed my judgment. Explaining the situation to someone completely removed from my family dynamics provided perspective I had lost amid legal complexities and emotional turmoil. Eleanor listened without judgment, asked clarifying questions, and offered practical advice about self-care during crisis periods. "Kristy, what your family did is terrible and criminal, but you can't let their actions destroy your health and future. You need professional help to process these emotions while maintaining your strength for the legal battles ahead." Her recommendation for a therapist who specialized in family trauma and financial abuse led to my first appointment Monday afternoon. Dr. Rebecca Martinez's calm professionalism provided a safe space to explore emotions I had been suppressing in favor of practical crisis management. "Miss Harrison, what you're experiencing is normal response to extraordinary betrayal and violation. The combination of financial crime and family dysfunction creates complex trauma that requires time and support to process effectively." Dr. Martinez explained how family financial abuse often caused more lasting psychological damage than stranger crimes because it violated fundamental assumptions about trust, safety, and relationship security. The people who should protect and support victims instead become the primary source of threat and danger. "The anxiety, depression, and trust issues you're experiencing are natural responses to having your basic security systematically destroyed by people you loved and trusted. Recovery requires rebuilding those foundations while learning to protect yourself from further violation." Tuesday evening brought the emotional breaking point when my mother called with a voicemail message that shattered any remaining hope for family reconciliation or accountability. Her cold, calculated tone revealed the depth of her narcissism and complete lack of empathy for the destruction she had caused. "Kristy, you're being dramatic and vindictive about normal family financial arrangements. If you continue pursuing these ridiculous criminal charges, we'll be forced to take legal action to protect our reputation and financial security. Drop this nonsense before you destroy what's left of this family forever." The message contained no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, no expression of remorse, and no recognition of the massive damage their crimes had inflicted on my life and future. Instead, it positioned me as the aggressor for seeking justice while threatening further legal action if I refused to accept their theft quietly. But the most chilling aspect of my mother's message was the implicit threat to escalate their criminal activity if I refused to cooperate with their demands. People who had already committed federal fraud, identity theft, and forgery were threatening additional crimes to avoid accountability for their previous actions. Wednesday morning's panic attack landed me in the emergency room when shortness of breath and chest pains convinced me I was experiencing cardiac problems. The medical evaluation revealed severe dehydration, malnutrition, and stress-related symptoms that required immediate intervention and monitoring. Emergency room physician Dr. James Thompson explained how prolonged stress could manifest in physical symptoms that mimicked serious medical conditions while creating genuine health risks if left untreated. The prescription included anxiety medication, nutritional counseling, and mandatory stress management techniques. "Miss Harrison, your body is responding normally to abnormal stress levels. The criminal prosecution and family conflict are legitimate crises that require professional support and self-care to navigate successfully without permanent health consequences." The hospital social worker Maria Santos provided resources for victims of financial crimes, while explaining how family-based fraud often created unique psychological challenges that required specialized therapeutic intervention and support group participation. Verbs, family financial abuse violates fundamental trust relationships while creating isolation from normal support systems. Victims often struggle with guilt, shame, and confusion about pursuing justice against people they love despite their criminal behavior. Thursday brought revelation that my stress and health issues were affecting my professional performance in ways I hadn't recognized. Dr. Evans called with concerns about missed deadlines, communication errors, and decision-making inconsistencies that suggested I needed immediate medical leave to address personal health issues. Kristy, we value you as an employee and want to support your recovery, but your current condition is affecting work quality and team dynamics. Taking medical leave will protect your position while giving you time to address these health concerns properly. The irony wasn't lost that my parents' crimes were now forcing career interruptions that would compound the long-term professional damage they had already inflicted through their systematic sabotage and security clearance complications. Friday evening's climactic moment came when Danny called in tears, finally ready to admit the full extent of our parents' manipulation and his own complicity in their criminal enterprise. His emotional breakdown provided the validation I desperately needed while confirming my worst fears about the scope of their deception. Kristy, I'm so sorry. They've been stealing from my business account and lying about everything. The startup money is gone. My employees quit when paychecks bounced, and I just found out they've been taking loans against my apartment without my knowledge. His confession revealed that our parents had been systematically defrauding both their children while playing us against each other through lies and manipulation. Danny's recognition of their true nature came too late to prevent massive damage, but provided crucial evidence for criminal prosecution. They told me you were mentally unstable and dangerous, that pursuing criminal charges proved you needed psychiatric intervention. But now I realize they were projecting their own behavior while trying to isolate us from supporting each other. The revelation that our parents had attempted to turn their victims against each other while portraying us as mentally unstable demonstrated the sophisticated psychological manipulation underlying their criminal enterprise. They weren't just thieves. They were expert manipulators who had spent years perfecting their techniques. But Danny's final confession provided the missing piece of evidence that would transform the criminal investigation from family dispute into serious federal case. He had recorded conversations with our parents where they admitted to years of systematic fraud while discussing plans to eliminate evidence and silence potential witnesses through intimidation. Kristy, I recorded them because I was scared about what they might do when the criminal investigation started. They talked about destroying documents, intimidating witnesses, and even suggested that accidents could solve their problems permanently. The implication that our parents might escalate from financial crimes to physical violence against their own children provided the final motivation I needed to prioritize personal safety while pursuing justice regardless of family consequences or emotional cost. Monday morning brought a phone call that transformed my understanding of my parents' motivations from desperate opportunism to calculated criminal enterprise. Attorney Morrison's voice carried an excitement I hadn't heard since our initial consultation as she shared discoveries from forensic accountants examining my parents' financial history. Kristy, the investigation has uncovered evidence that your parents are facing complete financial ruin from sources we never suspected. Robert's accounting firm fired him 3 months ago for embezzling client funds totaling over $400,000. Criminal charges are pending, but they've been sealed pending the ongoing investigation. The revelation that my father faced federal embezzlement charges explained the desperate timeline of their theft. My lakehouse sale wasn't about funding Danny's dreams or addressing my supposed problems. It was about avoiding federal prison and financial devastation from his own criminal activity at work. The forensic analysis shows systematic theft from client accounts over approximately 18 months, with the money being used to cover gambling debts and maintain their lifestyle while their legitimate income disappeared. But Morrison's next discovery proved even more shocking. Linda's gambling activities weren't casual entertainment, but serious addiction that had generated debts to dangerous people demanding immediate payment with threats of violence for non-compliance. Your mother owes approximately $200,000 to underground gambling operations that don't negotiate payment plans or accept excuses. The people involved have criminal records, including assault, extortion, and worse. Your parents were literally stealing to stay alive. The forensic accountants had traced money flows that revealed the true scope of my parents' financial crimes extending far beyond their theft from me. They had defrauded elderly relatives, stolen from church funds where Robert served as treasurer, and even embezzled money from Danny's college fund years earlier. Kristy, what we're looking at isn't family financial mismanagement, but rather a sophisticated criminal operation that has been targeting vulnerable people for over 5 years. You and Danny were just the most recent and largest victims. Morrison explained how my parents had perfected their techniques through smaller frauds before escalating to the systematic theft of my assets. Each previous crime had taught them better methods for forgery, identity theft, and victim manipulation, while building resources for larger operations. The investigation revealed that my parents had established multiple fake identities using variations of family members' personal information. Bank accounts, credit cards, and loan applications existed under names that resembled mine and Danny's, but weren't quite identical, creating plausible deniability while facilitating their criminal activities. The sophistication suggests they may have been receiving professional guidance from someone experienced in financial fraud. The techniques they employed require knowledge that goes beyond amateur criminal behavior. But the most disturbing discovery awaited in the insurance investigation files. My parents had systematically increased life insurance coverage on both Danny and me while positioning themselves as beneficiaries, creating financial incentives for our deaths that extended far beyond simple greed. Kristy, the life insurance modifications were processed over the past year using forged documents that granted them authority over your policies. The total coverage on your life now exceeds $1 million payable directly to them upon your death. Morrison's voice carried genuine concern as she explained the implications. People who steal hundreds of thousands of dollars and face federal prison sometimes become desperate enough to consider extreme solutions. The insurance situation, combined with their mounting debts and criminal exposure, creates a genuinely dangerous situation. The forensic team had also discovered evidence that my parents had been researching methods for staging accidental deaths while avoiding insurance investigation. Internet search histories revealed disturbing inquiries about vehicle accidents, home fires, and prescription drug overdoses that could appear accidental while generating insurance payouts. The search patterns suggest they've been considering options for several months. Combined with their desperate financial situation and pending criminal charges, we need to take the possibility of physical danger very seriously. Morrison recommended immediate personal security measures, including changing my residence location, varying daily routines, and installing security systems while criminal investigations proceeded. The transformation from family dispute to potential homicide threat required professional protection services beyond normal legal representation. But the investigation's most shocking revelation concerned the true scope of victims affected by my parents' criminal enterprise. Church records, family financial documents, and community organization accounts revealed dozens of elderly and vulnerable people who had been systematically defrauded over years of trusted relationships. Your parents specifically targeted people who trusted them completely, using their positions as church treasurer and community volunteers to identify potential victims with substantial assets and limited family oversight. The pattern revealed calculated predatory behavior that exploited fundamental human trust and community relationships for financial gain. My parents weren't desperate people making poor decisions. They were sophisticated criminals who had built their entire lifestyle around systematic theft from vulnerable victims. Morrison's team had identified as at least 23 separate victims whose total losses exceeded $700,000 over 5 years of organized criminal activity. The federal investigation was expanding rapidly as additional victims emerged and evidence accumulated. Kristy, this case is becoming much larger than simple family fraud. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit is treating your parents as leaders of a criminal organization that has victimized multiple communities across several states. The interstate nature of their crimes triggered federal racketeering statutes that carried mandatory prison sentences far exceeding simple fraud convictions. If proven, my parents faced decades in federal prison with no possibility of early release or reduced sentences. But the climactic discovery that changed everything came when forensic accountants found evidence that my parents had been planning to fake my death to claim life insurance proceeds while eliminating their primary witness against their criminal activities. The planning documents we found suggest they were researching methods that would appear accidental while occurring during a period when you were under severe stress from family conflicts. The insurance companies would likely pay without extensive investigation if your death appeared to result from suicide or accident related to your emotional state. Morrison's final revelation sent chills through my entire body as I realized how close I had come to becoming a victim of far more than financial theft. Kristy, we found evidence that your parents had been purchasing materials consistent with staging a carbon monoxide poisoning that would appear accidental. The timeline suggests they were planning to act within the next few weeks. The investigation had uncovered my parents' complete transformation from loving family members to dangerous criminals willing to murder their own children for financial gain and criminal cover-up. The people who had raised me and shared decades of family memories were planning to end my life for money and personal protection. But this devastating revelation also provided the evidence necessary to ensure their prosecution and permanent incarceration while protecting other potential victims from their escalating criminal behavior. Tuesday evening brought a conference call that would shatter any remaining illusions about my parents' isolated criminal behavior. Extended family members contacted me after Morrison's investigators reached out with questions about their own financial interactions with Robert and Linda over the years. Aunt Margaret called first, her voice shaky with anger and disbelief as she shared discoveries about her own victimization. "Kristy, honey, I owe you an enormous apology. After talking with the investigators, I realized your parents have been stealing from me for over 3 years." Her revelation opened floodgates of similar confessions from relatives who had trusted my parents completely while being systematically defrauded through sophisticated schemes that exploited family relationships and community standing. When George died 2 years ago, I asked your father to help manage his estate paperwork because I was overwhelmed with grief and legal complications. He offered to handle everything while I recovered emotionally. But Robert's helpful assistance had concealed systematic theft from Uncle George's estate, with valuable assets disappearing through forged transfer documents, while Aunt Margaret struggled with loss and depression. The total theft exceeded $60,000 in cash investments and family heirlooms. I trusted him completely because he was family and seemed so knowledgeable about financial matters. He explained that estate taxes required selling some assets quickly, and I signed documents without reading them carefully because I was grieving and confused. Cousin Jennifer joined the call with her own story of victimization that revealed the sophisticated nature of my parents' long-term criminal planning. Her college fund established by grandparents years earlier had been gradually drained through forged withdrawal authorizations that her parents never detected. The statements showed regular investment growth, but I found out yesterday that those were fabricated documents. The actual account was emptied over 2 years ago, leaving me with student loans instead of the education funding my grandparents intended. Jennifer's discovery came only after investigators contacted her with questions about suspicious transactions involving her social security number and personal information. The sophisticated document forgery had convinced bank representatives and family members while facilitating systematic theft. Kristy, I'm horrified that I believed their stories about your mental health and financial problems. They showed me fake documents that made you seem irresponsible and dangerous while they were stealing from both of us. Uncle David's call revealed even more extensive victimization through investment schemes that promised high returns while actually funding my parents' gambling debts and lifestyle expenses. His retirement savings had been redirected to fake investment accounts that existed only on forged statements. Your father convinced me to move my 401k into a private investment fund he managed for family members. The paperwork looked professional, and the monthly statements showed excellent returns for almost 2 years. But the investment fund existed only in my parents' fabricated documentation, while the actual money disappeared into their personal accounts and gambling activities. Uncle David's 30-year retirement savings had been stolen while he believed he was building security for his golden years. The fake statements were incredibly detailed and convincing. They included market analysis, portfolio breakdowns, and professional formatting that would fool most people. I never suspected fraud because everything looked legitimate and profitable. The family conference call continued for over 3 hours as additional relatives shared their stories of victimization, manipulation, and systematic theft disguised as helpful financial assistance or investment opportunities. Cousin Michael revealed that my parents had stolen his small business startup funds through a fake loan program that promised family support for entrepreneurial ventures. The $25,000 loss had forced him to abandon his restaurant plans and take bankruptcy. They presented professional loan documents with reasonable interest rates and payment schedules. I thought the family was finally supporting my dreams instead of always favoring Danny's projects. Great-Aunt Florence, now 87 years old, had been convinced to transfer her modest savings to my parents' management to avoid nursing home asset seizures. The money had disappeared while she received fake statements showing safe investment growth. They said the government would take everything if I kept the money in my own name, but family trusts would protect my assets while generating income for my care. I trusted them because they were family and seemed so concerned about my welfare. The systematic targeting of elderly and vulnerable family members revealed the calculated nature of my parents' criminal enterprise. They had specifically exploited grief, confusion, trust, and fear to identify and victimize people who couldn't effectively resist or investigate their schemes. But the most heartbreaking revelation came from Danny, who finally understood the full scope of our parents' manipulation and his unwitting participation in their crimes against other family members. Kristy, they used me to help steal from everyone. They had me sign documents they claimed were family financial planning papers, but now I realize they were authorization forms that gave them access to other people's accounts and assets. Danny's innocent cooperation had provided legitimacy for many of their schemes, while creating paper trails that implicated him in their criminal activities. His signatures appeared on documents that facilitated theft from relatives who trusted the entire family. I thought I was helping protect family assets and plan for everyone's future. They made it seem like responsible financial planning that would benefit everyone involved. But Danny's most devastating confession revealed that our parents had been systematically poisoning family relationships for years, spreading lies and creating conflicts that prevented victims from comparing experiences or supporting each other. They told me that Aunt Margaret was becoming senile and making poor financial decisions. They said Uncle David was gambling away his retirement and needed intervention. They claimed Jennifer was involved with drugs and couldn't be trusted with education money. The sophisticated psychological manipulation had isolated victims while preventing them from discovering the truth about our parents' criminal activities. Each family member believed they were protecting others from dangerous or irresponsible behavior, while actually facilitating systematic theft. Morrison's investigation team had documented total family losses exceeding $800,000 over 5 years of organized criminal activity. The FBI was building racketeering cases that would ensure lengthy federal prison sentences while protecting future potential victims. But the climactic moment of family reckoning came when we realized that our parents' criminal behavior had been escalating toward violence as legal pressure increased, and their options for continued theft diminished. They weren't just stealing money, Danny said through tears. They were destroying our entire family while planning to eliminate anyone who threatened their scheme. We all could have ended up dead if you hadn't discovered the truth when you did. The family conference call ended with a commitment to support each other through the legal proceedings while working together to rebuild relationships based on honesty and mutual support rather than manipulation and exploitation. Federal courthouse steps had never felt more significant as I climbed toward the building where my parents would finally face justice for their years of systematic criminal activity. 6 months of investigation, documentation, and legal preparation culminated in this moment when truth would prevail over manipulation and accountability would replace impunity. Assistant U.S. Attorney David Chen had built an overwhelming case that transformed what began as family financial dispute into a federal racketeering prosecution with implications extending far beyond my personal victimization. The courtroom gallery was filled with family members, community victims, and media representatives who had followed the expanding investigation. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the evidence will show that Robert and Linda Harrison operated a sophisticated criminal enterprise for over 5 years, systematically defrauding vulnerable family members, church congregants, and community organizations through identity theft, forgery, and elaborate deception schemes. Chen's opening statement outlined the scope of criminal activity with clinical precision that transformed my parents from loving family members into dangerous predators who had exploited trust and authority for personal gain while destroying lives and relationships throughout their community. The defendants didn't simply make poor financial decisions or succumb to momentary temptation. They planned, organized, and executed dozens of sophisticated frauds that targeted the elderly, the grieving, and family members who trusted them completely. The prosecution's evidence included forensic accounting that traced money flows, handwriting analysis that proved systematic forgery, and digital evidence that documented planning and coordination of criminal activities across state lines and multiple victims. My testimony consumed an entire day as Chen methodically established the timeline of discovery, investigation, and evidence gathering that revealed my parents' criminal enterprise. Speaking directly to the jury about my family's betrayal felt emotionally devastating but legally necessary for achieving justice. Miss Harrison, please tell the jury how you first discovered that your vacation home had been sold without your knowledge or consent. The questions guided me through the chronological development of evidence that proved systematic criminal activity rather than isolated incidents or family financial misunderstanding. Each answer built toward the inescapable conclusion that my parents had operated as sophisticated criminals. Defense attorney Maria Gonzalez attempted to portray my parents as loving family members whose poor judgment had been motivated by genuine concern for their children's welfare rather than criminal intent to defraud vulnerable victims. Ladies and gentlemen, this case represents a family tragedy where parents made desperate decisions to protect their children from financial ruin. While their methods were questionable, their motivations were rooted in love and family loyalty, rather than criminal greed. But the defense strategy crumbled under the weight of evidence showing systematic targeting of elderly victims, sophisticated forgery techniques, and planning documents that revealed calculated criminal intent rather than desperate family intervention. The prosecution's expert witnesses destroyed any pretense that my parents' behavior represented anything other than professional-level criminal enterprise. FBI forensic accountant Sarah Williams explained the sophisticated money laundering techniques they had employed. The defendants established multiple shell entities and fake identities to obscure money flows while creating false documentation that would fool both victims and financial institutions. This level of sophistication requires extensive planning and criminal expertise. Handwriting expert Dr. Michael Roberts demonstrated how my parents had practiced signature forgery using systematic techniques that produced nearly perfect replications of victim signatures on legal documents. The practice sheets we recovered show months of preparation and refinement of forgery techniques. This wasn't impulsive behavior, but rather deliberate skill development for criminal purposes. Digital forensics expert Jennifer Martinez revealed the extent of their electronic surveillance and identity theft activities, including keylogging software on family computers and systematic email interception that provided intelligence for their criminal schemes. The defendants had been monitoring their victims' electronic communications for over 2 years, gathering personal information that enabled them to impersonate family members and access secured accounts. But the prosecution's most compelling evidence came from recorded conversations where my parents discussed their criminal activities with casual indifference to the harm they were inflicting on family members and community victims. Danny's secret recordings captured our parents planning additional thefts while discussing methods for eliminating witnesses and destroying evidence if legal pressure continued to increase. The conversations revealed complete lack of remorse or empathy for their victims. If Kristy keeps pushing this investigation, we might need to consider permanent solutions to protect ourselves, Linda's voice said on recordings that chilled the courtroom. Accidents happen, and insurance money would solve our immediate problems while ending the threat. The jury's reaction to evidence of planned violence against their own children demonstrated the moral bankruptcy underlying my parents' criminal behavior. These weren't desperate people making poor choices. They were dangerous predators willing to murder for financial gain. Robert's testimony in his own defense provided the most damaging evidence against their case as he attempted to justify systematic theft while claiming concern for family welfare. His narcissistic inability to accept responsibility revealed the depth of his psychological disconnection from normal human empathy. I was trying to protect my children from their own poor financial decisions. Kristy was wasting money on that vacation house, while Danny needed investment capital for his future. Family assets should be managed for everyone's benefit, not hoarded by individuals. But Prosecutor Chen's cross-examination destroyed Robert's justification by forcing him to explain the targeting of elderly victims, the sophisticated forgery operations, and the planning documents that discussed violence against potential witnesses. Mr. Harrison, how does stealing $60,000 from your deceased brother's estate protect your children? How does defrauding an 87-year-old woman of her life savings represent family financial management? Robert's inability to provide coherent answers while maintaining his justification narrative revealed the complete disconnection from reality that had enabled years of systematic criminal behavior without remorse or accountability. Linda's testimony proved even more damaging as she blamed victims for trusting family members while showing no recognition of the harm her criminal behavior had inflicted on people who loved and supported her for decades. People should be more careful about their financial security instead of expecting family members to always act in their best interests. We were teaching them important lessons about self-reliance and protection. The jury deliberation lasted only 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges, including racketeering, wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, and attempted murder. The unanimous convictions carried mandatory minimum sentences totaling 45 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. Judge Patricia Williams expressed profound dismay at the calculated nature of their crimes, while emphasizing the need for sentences that would protect society from further predatory behavior and deter similar family-based criminal enterprises. The defendants exploited the most fundamental human relationships of trust and love to facilitate systematic theft from vulnerable victims, including their own children. The sophistication and duration of their criminal enterprise requires sentences that ensure they never again have opportunity to victimize innocent people. The courtroom erupted in applause as sentences were announced. Robert received 25 years in federal prison, while Linda received 20 years with restitution orders totaling over $1 million to compensate victims for their losses and suffering. But the most satisfying moment came when my parents finally showed their true nature as they were led away in handcuffs. Instead of remorse or apology, they screamed accusations at their victims while claiming persecution and injustice for being held accountable for their criminal behavior. "You destroyed this family for money," Linda shrieked as federal marshals restrained her. "We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us." Their complete inability to recognize their own criminal behavior or accept responsibility for the harm they had inflicted provided final validation that prosecution had been necessary to protect potential future victims from their escalating predatory activities. 3 weeks after my parents' conviction, Morrison called with news that would transform my understanding of the entire legal victory, from simple justice to something approaching miraculous restoration. Her voice carried excitement that suggested developments far beyond the expected asset recovery proceedings. "Kristy, the investigation has uncovered several extraordinary circumstances that completely change your financial situation and future prospects. The forensic team found evidence that your lakehouse sale was actually invalid due to technical errors in the forgery documentation." The real estate transaction had failed to meet legal requirements for property transfer because my parents' forged power of attorney documents contained subtle but critical errors that invalidated the entire sale. The buyer's innocent parties who had acted in good faith agreed to return the property in exchange for recovery of their deposit through insurance coverage. "The title company's insurance will cover the innocent buyer's losses while returning full ownership of your vacation home. You'll have your lake house back within 60 days once paperwork is completed." But Morrison's most shocking revelation concerned discoveries made during asset forfeiture proceedings that revealed hidden resources my parents had never mentioned and probably forgotten about during their years of criminal activity. "During the investigation into your parents' financial history, we uncovered evidence that your grandmother had established a substantial trust fund that was designed to become available to you on your 30th birthday. The trust administrators never contacted you because your parents had been intercepting correspondence." My grandmother's trust fund contained not just the expected inheritance money, but also investment growth that had accumulated over 15 years of careful management by professional trustees who had been waiting for contact from the designated beneficiary. The trust contains approximately $450,000 in diversified investments, plus additional assets including real estate holdings and family heirlooms that your parents never knew existed. The trust documents revealed that my grandmother had suspected my parents' manipulative tendencies even before their criminal behavior escalated, and she had specifically designed the trust to protect my future from their potential interference or exploitation. Your grandmother included detailed instructions expressing concern about your parents' attitudes toward money and their treatment of you compared to your brother. She wanted to ensure your independence and security regardless of family dynamics. But the most touching discovery was a personal letter from my grandmother that had been sealed with the trust documents intended to be delivered when I gained access to the protected assets on my 30th birthday last month. Morrison read portions of the letter over the phone, and my grandmother's voice seemed to speak across the years with wisdom that proved prophetic about my family situation and the challenges I would face. My dear Kristy, if you are reading this letter, then you have reached 30 years old and hopefully achieved the independence and strength I always saw in your spirit. I worry about your parents' influence on your future happiness and security. The letter continued with observations about my parents' character flaws and my brother's enabling relationship that demonstrated my grandmother's understanding of family dynamics that would eventually lead to the criminal behavior I had endured. Your parents have always favored Danny while expecting you to be self-sufficient without support or recognition. This pattern concerns me because it suggests they view you as a resource rather than a daughter deserving love and protection. My grandmother's letter included specific warnings about potential financial manipulation and instructions for protecting myself from family members who might try to exploit my trusting nature or access the trust assets for their own benefit. I am establishing this trust in secret because I fear your parents would attempt to control or steal these assets if they knew about them. The trustees have instructions to resist any family pressure and ensure these resources serve your genuine interests alone. But the most devastating revelation in my grandmother's letter concerned life insurance policies she had discovered my parents taking out on me and Danny during our teenage years, policies they had concealed from everyone while maintaining premium payments for potential future benefit. I found evidence that your parents have been planning to profit from tragedy involving their children. This discovery convinced me that extraordinary measures are necessary to protect both you and Danny from people who should love you, but instead view you as financial assets. Morrison's investigation had confirmed that my parents' life insurance schemes extended far beyond their recent activities, with policies dating back over 15 years that revealed long-term planning for potential financial benefit from their children's deaths. The insurance investigation revealed systematic policy modifications and beneficiary changes that created substantial incentives for harm to both you and Danny. Your grandmother apparently discovered this and made her own preparations to protect your future. The trust fund wasn't just financial protection, it was my grandmother's attempt to ensure my survival and independence from parents whose dangerous behavior had been developing for decades before reaching the criminal level that finally triggered legal intervention. But Morrison's final revelation provided the most shocking discovery of all. The insurance company's investigation had uncovered evidence that my parents had been planning to fake my death to claim life insurance proceeds while eliminating their primary witness against their ongoing criminal activities. The evidence suggests they had been planning a carbon monoxide poisoning that would appear accidental and occur during a period when you were under severe stress from family conflicts. The timing would have made your death seem like suicide or accident related to your emotional state. The investigators found purchase records for equipment and materials consistent with staging such an incident, along with internet search histories that showed research into methods for avoiding insurance company investigation of suspicious deaths. Your parents weren't just stealing money, Kristy. They were planning to murder you for insurance proceeds while eliminating the witness who could destroy their criminal enterprise. The trust fund discovery means your grandmother may have literally saved your life by giving you resources to fight back. The magnitude of my parents' evil combined with my grandmother's prescient protection created an emotional response that ranged from gratitude to horror as I realized how close I had come to becoming a victim of far more than financial theft. Morrison, are you telling me that my grandmother somehow knew my parents were capable of murdering their own children for money? The question sounded insane even as I asked it. The evidence suggests she recognized dangerous patterns that would eventually escalate to life-threatening behavior. The insurance policies she discovered represented early warning signs that convinced her to take extraordinary protective measures. But the final surprise awaited in additional trust documents that revealed my grandmother had also established protective resources for Danny, contingent on his demonstrating genuine remorse and cooperation with law enforcement efforts to prosecute their parents' criminal activities. Your brother will receive access to educational funding and counseling resources designed to help him break free from your parents' manipulative influence while building legitimate independence and self-respect. The comprehensive nature of my grandmother's protective planning suggested she had been aware of my parents' dangerous potential for years, while carefully preparing resources that would become available when we finally needed them most. 18 months later, I stood on the restored deck of my beloved lake house, watching sunrise paint the water in shades of gold and amber that reminded me why I had fallen in love with this place originally. The gentle morning breeze carried no echoes of the trauma and betrayal that had nearly destroyed everything I valued most. The restoration process had consumed months of careful work to repair damage inflicted during the brief period when the innocent buyers had attempted to modify the property to suit their different lifestyle preferences. New hardwood floors replaced damaged originals, while the stone fireplace required complete rebuilding after misguided renovation attempts. But every board replaced and every stone reset felt like reclaiming pieces of myself that my parents' crimes had threatened to destroy forever. Working alongside contractors and craftsmen who respected the property's original design created therapeutic satisfaction that went far beyond simple home improvement. Danny had become an unexpected source of support throughout the restoration, using skills learned during his failed business venture to help with project management and quality control. His genuine remorse and commitment to rebuilding our relationship had transformed him from unwitting accomplice to trusted ally. Kristy, I know I can never undo the damage I caused by believing their lies and enabling their criminal behavior. But I want you to know that working on this restoration has helped me understand what you were trying to build here and why it meant so much to you. Our sibling relationship required careful reconstruction built on honesty and mutual respect rather than the manipulation and competition our parents had fostered throughout our childhood. Therapy sessions helped both of us recognize and change unhealthy patterns while building genuine friendship. The extended family relationships required similar healing work as relatives processed their own victimization while learning to trust and support each other without the toxic influence of my parents' manipulation and lies. Aunt Margaret had become particularly close as we worked together to support other elderly family members who were recovering from financial and emotional abuse. Her transformation from critic to advocate demonstrated the healing power of truth and accountability. I'm so grateful you had the courage to pursue justice, even when it meant prosecuting your own parents. Without your strength and determination, they would have continued destroying lives while we all remained isolated and vulnerable. Cousin Jennifer's college funding had been partially restored through asset recovery proceedings, allowing her to complete her education while building career prospects that had seemed impossible during the height of her parents' financial manipulation. Uncle David's retirement planning required more complex reconstruction, but the trust fund resources my grandmother had provided enabled family loans that helped restore his security while building stronger relationships based on mutual support rather than exploitation. The community response had evolved from initial skepticism and division to widespread support and gratitude as people recognized the courage required to expose family criminal activity while protecting other potential victims from continued predatory behavior. My former high school teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, had become an advocate for financial abuse awareness, using our family's story to educate community groups about warning signs of elder fraud and family exploitation. Your willingness to speak publicly about these crimes has helped other families recognize similar patterns and seek help before experiencing the level of damage your family endured. Professional restoration had exceeded my most optimistic expectations as the security clearance investigation concluded with complete vindication and recognition that my behavior throughout the crisis had demonstrated exceptional character and integrity under extreme pressure. Colonel Martinez had personally recommended me for promotion and additional responsibilities that reflected the leadership skills and moral courage I had demonstrated during the criminal prosecution of my own family members. Harrison, your handling of an impossible situation has convinced me that you possess exactly the kind of character and judgment we need for classified projects involving national security. Your promotion is effective immediately. The workplace relationships that had been strained during the investigation had rebuilt into stronger professional friendships based on respect for my resilience and commitment to doing what was right, regardless of personal cost or family pressure. Dr. Evans had offered me leadership opportunities on international projects that would advance my career while providing scope for the analytical and decision-making skills I had developed during the legal proceedings. Ooh, Kristy, you've shown that you can maintain professional excellence and ethical standards even when facing personal crises that would destroy most people's ability to function effectively. But the most satisfying restoration involved my personal sense of peace and security that had been shattered by my family's systematic betrayal and criminal manipulation. Therapy with Dr. Martinez had helped me process the complex emotions surrounding family criminal victimization while developing healthy boundaries and trust instincts that would protect me from future exploitation. Miss Harrison, you've done the difficult work of healing from profound betrayal while maintaining your capacity for love and relationship. That combination of wisdom and openness will serve you well in building the future you deserve. The lakehouse had become a gathering place for the extended family members who were committed to building honest relationships based on mutual support and respect, rather than the manipulation and competition our parents had fostered. Holiday celebrations felt genuine and peaceful for the first time in memory as we created new traditions based on authenticity and choice, rather than obligation and guilt. Danny's progress through therapy and legitimate career development had been remarkable as he learned to trust his own judgment while building independence from our parents' toxic influence and enabling patterns. Kristy, I finally understand that our parents' approval was never worth earning because it came at the cost of our own integrity and their victims' welfare. Building a life based on honest work and real relationships feels so much better than anything they ever offered. The financial security provided by my grandmother's trust fund, combined with asset recovery from criminal proceedings, had restored my economic independence while providing resources for helping other family members rebuild their lives. Investment planning with ethical advisors had created sustainable income streams that would ensure long-term security while providing flexibility for pursuing meaningful work rather than simply maximizing earnings. But the most profound restoration involved my relationship with the concept of family itself. The experience had taught me that genuine family consists of people who support each other's growth and happiness, rather than those who share biological connections while engaging in exploitation and manipulation. True family are the people who celebrate your successes, support your dreams, and protect your well-being, even when it requires difficult choices or personal sacrifice. Blood relationship means nothing without love, respect, and mutual care. The community of friends, chosen family members, and professional colleagues who had supported me throughout the crisis had proven far more valuable and trustworthy than biological relatives who had betrayed me for financial gain. My grandmother's letter had concluded with wisdom that proved prophetic about the importance of building independence while maintaining openness to genuine love and support from trustworthy people. Remember that protecting yourself from those who would harm you doesn't mean closing your heart to those who would love you. Discernment is the key to both safety and happiness. Standing on my restored deck as morning light transformed the lake into liquid gold, I felt profound gratitude for the strength to fight back against injustice, the wisdom to recognize authentic relationships, and the opportunity to build a life based on truth, integrity, and genuine love. 2 years after my parents' conviction, I find myself reflecting on the transformative journey from devastating betrayal to genuine healing, while sitting in my favorite spot on the lakehouse deck. The morning mist rises from water that mirrors the peaceful sky, creating a perfect metaphor for the clarity that emerged from the chaos my family's crimes had created. The legal victory felt satisfying, but the personal growth that followed proved far more valuable than any financial recovery or criminal justice outcome. Learning to trust my own perceptions while building authentic relationships required courage I never knew I possessed until circumstances demanded its development. Danny joins me for our monthly breakfast tradition that has become sacred time for continuing the honest communication that replaced decades of manipulation and competition. His transformation from unwitting accomplice to trusted ally demonstrates the healing power of accountability and genuine remorse. I keep thinking about how different our childhood would have been if we had been encouraged to support each other instead of competing for approval that was never really available. He muses while sipping coffee from handmade mugs created by a local artist. Our conversations often return to the question of forgiveness and whether healing requires pardoning people who have shown no remorse or accountability for the harm they inflicted. Prison visits confirmed that our parents remained convinced they were justified in stealing from family members while planning violence against potential witnesses. I've learned that forgiveness is something I do for my own peace, not something I owe to people who harmed me. Protecting myself from ongoing manipulation isn't vindictive. It's necessary for building genuine happiness. The extended family gatherings that occur here quarterly have become celebrations of authentic connection rather than obligatory performances of dysfunction. Relatives who survived my parents' systematic fraud have learned to support each other while building relationships based on mutual respect rather than hierarchy and exploitation. Aunt Margaret brings homemade pies that taste like childhood memories, untainted by current knowledge of family criminal behavior. Uncle David shares updates about his restored retirement security while expressing gratitude for the courage to expose crimes that could have continued indefinitely without intervention. Your willingness to prosecute your own parents saved all of us from continued victimization while teaching us that family loyalty shouldn't require accepting abuse or criminal behavior. He reminds me during every visit. Cousin Jennifer's graduation from law school represents triumph over the financial sabotage that could have destroyed her educational dreams. She plans to specialize in elder law and family financial abuse, using personal experience to protect other vulnerable people from predatory relatives. Watching you fight back against impossible odds taught me that justice requires courage and persistence, even when the system seems designed to protect perpetrators rather than victims. Professional success has exceeded my expectations as colleagues and supervisors recognize that surviving family criminal victimization while maintaining ethical standards demonstrates character traits valuable for leadership responsibilities involving trust and integrity. The international project I now lead requires cultural sensitivity and communication skills that were developed through necessity during legal proceedings that spanned multiple jurisdictions and stakeholder groups with conflicting interests and motivations. Crisis management skills learned during family fraud prosecution translate remarkably well to managing complex defense contracts involving sensitive international relationships, Colonel Martinez observed during my most recent performance evaluation. But the most profound transformation involves my relationship with the concept of home and security. This lake house represents far more than real estate investment. It symbolizes the possibility of creating safe spaces where authentic relationships can flourish without manipulation or exploitation. Friends who gather here for weekend retreats often comment on the peaceful atmosphere that encourages honest conversation and genuine connection. The healing that occurred through restoration work has infused the physical space with emotional warmth that welcomes openness and vulnerability. There's something special about this place that makes people feel safe to be themselves without performance or pretense. My closest friend Sarah observes during our monthly book club meetings that have become treasured traditions. The writing I've begun about family financial abuse has attracted attention from advocacy organizations seeking authentic voices to educate communities about warning signs and prevention strategies. Speaking publicly about personal victimization requires ongoing courage, but provides meaning that transforms painful experience into valuable service. Your story gives hope to other families struggling with similar criminal behavior, while demonstrating that justice and healing are possible even in the most devastating circumstances, explains Rebecca Chen from the National Elder Financial Protection Alliance. Romantic relationships require careful navigation as I learn to distinguish between healthy interdependence and potentially exploitative dynamics. Therapy continues to provide guidance for recognizing red flags while maintaining openness to genuine love and partnership. Building trust after family betrayal takes time and patience, both for yourself and potential partners who want to understand your caution without taking it personally. Dr. Martinez reminds me during sessions that have evolved from crisis intervention to ongoing personal development. The financial security provided by my grandmother's prescient planning allows career choices based on meaning and mission, rather than simple economic necessity. Teaching part-time at the local community college provides satisfaction that exceeds any corporate advancement opportunity. Helping students develop critical thinking skills and ethical frameworks feels like honoring my grandmother's investment in my future while creating positive impact that extends far beyond personal recovery. Investment planning now includes charitable contributions to organizations that support family fraud victims and elder financial protection programs. Transforming personal tragedy into resources for systemic change provides purpose that transforms painful experience into meaningful legacy. But perhaps the most important lesson involves recognizing that authentic family consists of people who support each other's growth and happiness, regardless of biological connection or traditional expectations. The chosen family I've built includes friends, mentors, and colleagues who demonstrate love through actions rather than manipulation through words. Blood relationship creates opportunity for genuine family connection, but it doesn't automatically create obligation to accept abuse or criminal behavior. Protecting yourself from harmful people isn't betrayal, it's necessary self-care. Holiday celebrations now emphasize gratitude, service, and authentic connection rather than performance and obligation. The traditions we create honor genuine values while rejecting toxic patterns that masqueraded as family loyalty but actually enabled systematic exploitation. Christmas morning finds us volunteering at the shelter for domestic violence survivors, sharing breakfast with families who understand the courage required to leave dangerous situations regardless of emotional attachment or social pressure. Family should be a source of strength and safety, not danger and exploitation. When biological family fails to provide love and protection, we must create family with people who share our values and support our well-being. Community involvement has expanded beyond personal healing to include advocacy for policy changes that protect vulnerable people from family financial abuse while providing resources for prosecution and recovery when crimes occur. Testifying before state legislative committees about the need for improved fraud detection and victim support services transforms personal experience into systemic change that could prevent other families from experiencing similar devastation. Your courage in speaking publicly about family criminal behavior helps legislators understand the scope of this problem while providing authentic voice to policy discussions that too often lack real-world perspective. As I watch the sun complete its morning journey across water that reflects infinite possibilities, I'm struck by the realization that my parents' crimes, while devastating, ultimately led to discoveries about strength, authenticity, and genuine love that might never have emerged without crisis. The woman who discovered strangers moving furniture from her stolen property 2 years ago was naive about family dynamics and vulnerable to manipulation through misplaced loyalty and trust. The woman sitting here now possesses wisdom about relationships, boundaries, and self-protection that creates foundation for authentic happiness. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us clear away illusions that were preventing us from seeing truth and building genuine security. My parents' betrayal destroyed false hope but revealed real strength. The deep life lesson that emerges from this experience transcends simple moral about family loyalty or financial security. True peace comes from building life based on authentic relationships with trustworthy people who demonstrate love through consistent actions rather than manipulative words. Protecting yourself from harmful people, even family members, isn't selfish or vindictive. It's necessary for maintaining the emotional and physical safety required for genuine happiness and meaningful contribution to others' well-being. Family should multiply your strength and joy, not diminish it. When people who claim to love you consistently cause harm, creating distance isn't abandonment, it's wisdom. Save your energy and devotion for relationships that nurture growth and celebrate your authentic self. The future stretches ahead with possibilities that seemed impossible during the darkest moments of family crisis and legal uncertainty. Building life on foundation of truth, integrity, and mutual respect creates stability that no external betrayal can truly destroy. Recovery isn't about returning to who you were before trauma occurred. It's about becoming who you were meant to be without the limitations that harmful relationships imposed on your growth and potential. Standing here surrounded by evidence of restoration and renewal, I know with certainty that choosing truth over family loyalty, justice over peace, and self-protection over manipulation was the most loving decision I could have made for everyone involved, including my parents who needed accountability to stop their escalating criminal behavior. The lake reflects morning light like scattered diamonds, each sparkle representing a moment of joy that emerged from the ashes of betrayal. True family isn't defined by blood, but by love demonstrated through respect, support, and protection of each other's dreams and dignity. What would you do if you discovered that people you trusted completely had been systematically stealing your future while planning to eliminate you entirely? How do we balance family loyalty with self-protection when those concepts come into direct conflict? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below about navigating these impossible situations while maintaining hope for authentic relationships. If this story resonated with you or helped you process similar experiences, please like this video to help others find it when they need support and perspective. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming family trauma and building genuine happiness from authentic foundations. Share this story with anyone who might benefit from hearing that recovery is possible, that justice can prevail, and that protecting yourself from harmful people creates space for trustworthy relationships to flourish and grow. Thank you for listening to my journey from betrayal to healing. I wish you the wisdom to recognize authentic love, the courage to protect yourself from those who would harm you, and the peace that comes from building life on foundations of truth and mutual respect. May your chosen family bring you all the joy and security that healthy relationships can provide.